Well, good morning. Is that me? Well, thank you for having me. I talked to a couple of you this morning, and I think I threw some people off. I'm the same person. I'm just about 10 pounds lighter as I shaved my beard off. And I still have people that come up and say, hey, good to meet you. And I'm still Brian. I don't know. It'll come back. The jury's still out on that one. But I just want to say I'm excited to hear the body praying together as a church for our election and for our government. It's such an important thing. You know, if we would, and then I'm going to stop talking about that, but if we would pray as much as we do talk about our leaders and our government and all the problems in America, think of the change that we could have. But I'll put in my shameless plug. I will see all of you on Election Day here in East Bend Community Center or wherever it is in Dewey as an election judge, and thankful that God is in control. Well, Pastor Luke said I have an hour this morning, so I'm going to keep it under that. I want to share very briefly about the ministry. Some of the, most of you here know what Jesus is the way ministry is. I really want to share and thank you for the partnership. I remember when I came here last time, I believe Matt was talking about missions and here, near, and far, and how we can really get plugged in right here in our community. Because I think oftentimes people think about missions and it's, hey, I can't go overseas, or I can't go to these places. But I'm so thankful. Something that some of you may remember what Jesus is the Way building looked like many, many, many years ago. It's changed a lot. If we could put up that next slide. This talks briefly about our mission and who we are. What I really want to capture in that is our vision. And that's to see men walk out Philippians 3:13 and 14 by forgetting the past, facing the future, and focusing on God. It's really about a new life. It's really about a new journey and living life a new way. If you can put up that next slide. Well, we've had several of you out to do some work at the ministry, and I see some familiar faces. I really want to say thank you, because my heart is for the men to come and to start a new life, but it's 10 months that they get to call home. That's one of the first things we tell them when they get here, is welcome home. And it's something that we want them to be proud of. We want it to be more than just the bare minimum. We want them to feel the love of the Lord and the blessing that He has for them, for their lives. And so the work that's been done and redoing some of the rooms and just some of the area beautification, some of the amazing ladies that have brought the men meals that I have not heard anything bad about. So I think obviously, you know, a way to a man's heart is through his stomach. And so good home cooking food, even though we've got some guys that can cook, they enjoy and love the fresh food and things that have come. But yes, so our purpose and our vision and our mission haven't changed. I really, like I said, I just our vision. It's helping men to forget their past. The past is there. They can't live there, but they have to remember where they came, where they come from. Face the future. What does God have for them? And through that, focusing on Him and allowing Him to lead them. If you could, the next slide, please. And some pictures. Some of the team that's come out and done some work up there. It's, you know, under the leadership of Matt when he was there. Next slide, please. Another of the projects that we've been able to complete this year due to just the partnership of everybody is we've been able to paint the buildings. We've been able to tear down the old, and some of you have been out there and remember the old unsafe stairway that was there. That's been able to be rebuilt and redone and up to code to keep the guys safe. And then sponsoring a room, again, new furniture, carpet, paint, new vanities that some of the men here have put their hands to and built. Next slide, please. Uh, I'm excited, and hopefully we'll see some of you there on the evening of November 15th for our fall banquet, really to hear more stories about what the Lord is doing in the lives of the men and in the midst of Jesus the Way Ministries. God's done some amazing things. God's changed my heart over the past 2.5 years, and really how I see people, right? Man, I'm so glad that we serve a gracious God, and that God teaches us grace and mercy and corrects us and loves us and shows us the way. Next slide. Again, some of the more projects that we've completed. I think that was a hidden slide, but that's all right. Some of the ways that we can continue to, for people to come alongside and partner with us. Again, the guys are never going to turn down the meals. They love that. And then I believe on November 23rd, we're going to have a group come out from here at East Bend and do some work. And in the coming days, we'll be finalizing kind of the plans for that and what that's going to look like. So excited to see you come out and put your hands to that. New curriculum that we've stepped into this over the last couple of years. Just that's a way that you can bless the men, because it's a way to touch them and to help change their lives. So, because I'm going to be respectful of my time, under an hour, I want to share a word that I believe the Lord has for us, and it's something that we talk a lot about at the ministry. When Jesus makes someone new again, he cleanses the heart fully. The guys will hear it multiple times a day. It's a lifetime journey. It's a journey. It doesn't happen overnight. It's something that we walk through. When someone is injured so badly that they have to learn to walk again, they learn a new way of life. When people come from other countries, they have to adjust to our culture and our environment. It's literally a new way of life. It's more than just doing new things, it's a new way of life. When you lose a loved one and your life was completely wrapped up with them, you literally have to figure out a new way of life. What do we do with our time, our resources? And we can hint around at things that becoming new all over again. Some of my examples are just going to be new things that we do, not new ways of life, though. So I want to go deeper this morning and talk about the spiritual things and how when Jesus makes someone new again, he cleanses the heart fully, because God is in the business of making new people. He makes us new. But before I continue, I want to bring Michael up, and I'm going to give him an opportunity just to share a bit of his story. Because, again, I can come up here and speak, but I love hearing the stories of what God's doing in somebody's life. So, Michael, if you'd come up. This is Michael Simpson. He's been here about 3 months. Yeah. And God's done some phenomenal things over the last 3 months, and I just want to give him the opportunity to share a bit of that.
Hi, everybody. I'm Michael. I think it's great that you guys are doing James. I'm actually in a Bible study in a deep dive of James, so I actually wanted to start it out with James 2. Consider it all joy, my brothers, when you encounter various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance, and let that endurance have its perfect result, so that you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing. Again, my name is Michael Simpson. I was born of two broken people and raised in a broken home in this broken world. My parents were separated and divorced before I was 1.5 years old, after which my mom moved us around through a lot of broken and abusive relationships. And from those relationships came my five other siblings. She had a set of twins when I was about 7 years old. They were born premature, and due to complications, one of my little sisters sadly passed away after 30 days. This completely and utterly broke my mom. It just changed our lives entirely. It felt like the love in our home died with my little sister. She became really distant and cold, and again, we continued to move from town to town. And she was a very broken woman, and she tried to fill that with more broken, abusive relationships, and that abuse spilled over to her children. We had a very religious family. I wouldn't say spiritual, but I'd say religious. They stepped in, and they just brought persecution and judgment and even more abuse. So I knew God, but I knew nothing of his love for me. When I was 17, after all the years of abuse, I decided I just couldn't take it no more, and I quit school, quit the job I was working, and I moved away, lived in a car for a while. I wound up moving to another state even to get away from it. And at 19, I started my own family. I had 3 children and a fiance, and we were together for about 4.5 years. And when I was 23, there was a house fire. My world again turned upside down. I was able to get my fiance and our 9-month-old little girl out, and I went back in looking for our 2 boys until the fire department pulled me out, kicking and screaming. My boys, I couldn't find my boys. I was fighting them so hard they had to strap me to a gurney. And one of the fire department leaned over and told me, "Michael, we found your boys." And after that, I just kind of slipped off. I let go. I was ready. I spent 6 weeks in a coma fighting for my life, and many, many months after that, far from out of the woods. To give you an idea of how bad it was, I was burned over 70% of my body. They told my mom to expect at least 18 months in recovery, and that if you burn 5 people that badly, that we give one of them a 20% chance to make it. I spent 7.5 months, thank God, I walked out after 7.5 months on my own 2 feet. But during that time, I went through a lot of pain and a lot of treatment. All the while, I was asking to see my family and being told that, I wasn't doing well enough to see them, so I had to keep pushing through. So I pushed harder through my surgeries, my therapies, and after about 4 months, they finally let my fiance talk to me, and my world was again shaken. She told me that she was leaving me, and that our 2 boys actually didn't make it. But I pushed through the last 3.5 months of my recovery, because I still had the little girl that I pulled out. And after that, though, I just spiraled out of control. I started using drugs. I became very bitter. I had a lot of failed relationships, and I even had a failed marriage after that. And that went on for many years. I came to Illinois about 2 years ago, still in a very destructive cycle. And through some very bad choices, I found myself in jail with only regrets. I got used to running away from things, and I'd like to say I wasn't arrested, I was rescued. I was in jail, I couldn't run away anymore. I got sent a Bible from a guy that I went to church with, so I got a lot of time to just sit and think and read my Bible. And one night God came to me and said, "Michael, I'm not done with you yet. Just wait and see." And I got out, and I found my way to Jesus is the way. And in that, God found me at my lowest, and I've been able to grow my relationship with God because of this place. I've been leaning into his love. I've had so many victories. I'm now sober. I have no desire to go back. His love has sufficiently filled the hole that my drug use was only covering up. I recently had the anniversary of one of my boys, which I usually spent heavily under the influence of drugs. And this year I got to experience that for the first time completely sober. And But yeah, it wasn't easy, but God's gracious love carried me through it and gave me peace. I no longer dread and fear those days. He's been at work with me and letting go of toxic relationships when I struggled, but I was obedient and did so. And my sense of self-worth that I have now is something I never knew. That, I realized that it doesn't matter if they love me, he does, and that is more than sufficient for me. Then he asked me to further dig deep and forgive my uncle, who was a very abusive man to me. So I was scared, but I obediently reached out, and we had a conversation. And again, God stood in the gap for me. My uncle answered the phone, and we talked, and then he goes, I told him, Uncle Joe, I forgive you for how things were, and I want you to forgive me for holding on to it for so long. And what came next was so freeing and amazing. He goes, Michael, you have no idea how big this is. God has been working in my life, and I am so sorry. What I did to you was so wrong for so many years. Will you please forgive me? And I'm so proud of you. You see, I was just being obedient. I realized, God was already working behind the scenes in so many ways. I just had to obey. And now I have more peace, joy, and hope inside me than I've ever known in my whole life. I'm in a season of such growth and just, it's amazing what God can do. I thought I was too broken for God to fix, too broken for God to use. And I know now that that's different. If he can do that for me, he can do that much more for anybody. And I'm really, really super thankful for Jesus is the Way. We got a good group of guys there. Some of us had really abusive childhoods, bad childhoods like I did. Some of us didn't even have homes. And there we get a chance to dig in and evaluate that stuff to really, I've cried with many of these guys, something we really couldn't do in the circles we were in on the outside. That's weakness, and they'll tear you apart. But we get a safe place to be able to do that, to find God, to let him heal us. And Jesus' Way has just been such a blessing. I just want to end with Matthew 5, 3 through 10. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they are comforted. Blessed are the gentle, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons of God. Blessed are those who have been persecuted for the sake of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom. And one last is my favorite, actually, Joshua 1:9. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be terrified nor dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Thank you, guys.
Lovely. Change our places and the people who are around us around that place. Am I on? Okay, there you go. I turned it the wrong way. Sorry. So, I want to invite you to do something this morning. Do you remember when you first accepted Jesus as your Savior? I want to invite you to remember that time. Maybe it was at church camp. Maybe it was in the sanctuary. I want to invite you to remember when and why you gave your life to Christ. 1 Peter 1, verses 13 through 25 says, Therefore gird up the loins of your mind, be sober, and rest your hope fully upon the grace that is to be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. As obedient children, not conforming yourselves to to the former lusts as in your ignorance, but as he who called you is holy, you also be holy in all your conduct. Because it is written, be holy, for I am holy. And if you call on the Father, who without partiality judges according to each one's works, conduct yourselves throughout the time of your stay here in fear, knowing that you were not redeemed with corruptible things like silver or gold from your aimless conduct received by tradition from your fathers, but with the precious blood of Christ, as of a lamb without blemish and without spot. He indeed was foreordained because of the foundation of the world, but was manifest in these last times for you, who through him believe in God, who raised him from the dead and gave him glory, so that your faith and hope are in God. And since you have purified your souls in obeying the truth throughout the Spirit, in sincere love of the brethren, love one another fervently with a pure heart, having been born again, not of corruptible seed, but incorruptible, through the word of God, which lives and abides forever, because all flesh is as grass, and all the glory of man as the flower of the grass. The grass withers, and its flowers fall away, but the word of the God endures forever. So we're called to live a life of holiness. In verse 13 to 16, it talks about, after we've acknowledged what he's talked about in the first bit of that, Peter says, therefore, prepare. Or as we read, it says, gird, or in battle, it was to gather up their robes and prepare to walk into battle. He's speaking of action. The people of Israel were to eat the first Passover with your loins girded, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand, and you shall eat it in haste. Peter was using this as a metaphor, telling the church, prepare your minds and be self-controlled. Set your hope. Understand the source of our hope. Move towards the source of hope. Much like you would if you were in a dark tunnel, you would move toward the light. You would move toward the light because Jesus is our light. And when we see him as our hope, and we walk as obedient children, it reminds us of what they were. Very commonly, they were living in their old lusts, in their old ways. And when they could see who they were in him, to see the way he desires for them to live. They were living in ignorance. They were living according to their evil desires. They were conforming to the world. See, we can't expect non-Christians to act like Christians. Surprise. The best thing to do is to set the best example for them as you possibly can. The problem is more when we as Christians act like they have no understanding of the sacrifice of Jesus. Peter says, you don't live in ignorance now. You don't live according to your evil desires, and we should not conform to the world. It's not that all of a sudden we become full of knowledge when we become Christian. You don't rise out of the baptistry full of wisdom and understanding all the mysteries. If anything, you understand how much we don't know. It's not like all the evil desires suddenly leave. I was asked the other day if I was tempted. They understood I was a believer and simply asked, are you ever tempted? I told them no. I'm beyond temptation. I just do what I want and ask for forgiveness. Yeah, right. Of course I'm tempted. It's not that in this world we're not going to be tempted. It's how we handle those temptations. It's not that this world won't be pleasing to the eye. It's how we make the world conform to us. When you're in a group of people, who influences who, and who do you influence? I can be in the world, but make an influence on the world without conforming. His calling on his people, it was an unholy people. It was sinners, people with issues, downtrodden, abused, lonely. And so many of these men that walk in through our doors are just that. But his desire is that unholy people become holy. Sinners become forgiven. People who have issues are going to see solutions in him. Downtrodden will have their faces lifted. Abused will see freedom in Jesus. And lonely will find a friend and community. See, he calls people that he can use. He calls people who are willing to give him everything. He calls people that will make a difference in coming generations. God calls us to be holy. If you have your mind set on grace and are self-controlled and prepared, you will be holy. Not because of what you do, but because of what he does through you. This isn't about what you do, as if you can make yourself holy. This is about what God does through you. He prepares your mind for action. He makes you self-controlled. He keeps you from evil desires. Peter tells us, be holy in all that you do. What would happen if we applied that in our jobs, with our friends, in our homes, in our schools? What would happen? There's several images of God's holiness throughout the Old Testament. Psalms 33:21, in him our hearts rejoice, for we trust in his holy name. Isaiah 6:2-4, above him God were seraphs, each with 6 wings. With 2 wings they covered their feet, and with 2 they were flying. And they were calling to one another, holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty. The whole earth is full of his glory. In Psalm 145:21, my mouth will speak in praise of the Lord. Let every creature praise his holy name forever and ever. We could turn our city to Jesus if we could make a difference that could impact the lives of millions of people. How do we make a difference? We live and we walk in holiness. When Jesus makes someone new again, he cleanses the heart fully. It's a command to be holy because we are his people and we understand his grace for us. This is not intended for people who aren't called. It's not intended as a guideline for non-Christians. So we can't expect non-Christians to act like they're Christians. If you have no understanding of grace, you won't be holy. Peter makes the switch from a life of holiness, though, to a life of reverence. In verses 17-21, we talk about God's reverence for God. And this isn't a fear, this is a high level of respect for who he is and the authority that he has in our lives. Ephesians 5:21 says, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Psalm 5:7 says, but I, by your great mercy, will come into your house. In reverence, I will bow down toward your holy temple. See, it's our understanding of him, if we have a relationship with God, by virtue of our calling and our new birth, then it is all the more urgent that we remember who he is in himself and display the reverence that God deserves. Through his judgment of us, we're judged impartially. It's based on each man's work. What are we doing? What are we doing in our daily walk? It's easy for people to sit back on Sunday morning in their bed and claim that they're better than the people who fill our churches. If you think about it, they have a case. For them, it's better to claim nothing than to claim Christianity and have hope in Jesus. For them, it's better to live a lifestyle that conforms to the laws and hurt no one than to hope and change and grow and affect and be his hands and feet. My friends, I would rather hope in Jesus. See, it's not a military-esque type of judgment. This isn't a mass punishment. One messes up and everybody suffers for it. See, we're individually responsible for ourselves. We're also responsible for our fellow believers. How do we hold them accountable? How do we encourage one another? How do we grow each other up? How do we help set some guidelines and some guardrails for our brothers and sisters? See, Jesus had a choice. God offered Jesus thoughtfully, willingly, and carefully. Jesus thoughtfully went to the cross. He willingly went to the cross. And Jesus understood and carefully went to the cross. See, without Jesus, we might have knowledge of a God. We might have faith in at least one God. We might even have the same sense or some sense of a need to do good things to others. But we wouldn't have a complete understanding of God and who he is. Through Jesus, we have faith. We have hope. We believe. We have knowledge of the resurrection. And through God's work, he raised Jesus. He gave Jesus so that we could know him. He desires our hope and our faith. He desires a relationship with us. We move from a life of reverence into a life of love. In the last verses that I read this morning in 1 Peter 1, talks about a life of genuine love. And what this isn't, it's not a romantic love. It's not a family love. But what genuine love is it helps those in need. It loves when hurting people are hurting. It's giving self-disclosure. It's being real. It's rejoicing with others when they rejoice. This kind of love meets people on their level and loves them like Jesus. It shows them Jesus. Giving of your time and resources and opening yourself up to hurt. Love says, I will go where you go and be with you no matter what. This kind of love overlooks differences of opinions. Man, how could that change the world if we could communicate and operate in the midst of our differences? This kind of love is loyal. This love looks at the cross and sees the pain that Jesus went through, but it's also a reflection. When you find this person, it's a good thing. I believe there's many people who desire this kind of love. I believe that across the boardrooms of America and break rooms of America, our hearts are crying out to a living God because they hurt. There's a hurting heart. There's a hurting people. It might not be clear, but they are. You watch. We were talking about this the other day. Just watch when you're out. Watch people's faces. Watch how they act, how they respond. See, even the atheists in California who sued for a change in the pledge is crying out to God. Love's directed at people. It affects what we do with people around us and how we react to sin, how we open ourselves up. It's a new way of living and walking out. But love is only good when you give it away. A church that shows this kind of love will grow because the genuine spirit of love will attract the community. Love's directed at God. This also affects how you react to sin. This kind of love puts you open to trust God. You start to follow His leading. You allow Him to put you into situations that He only knows the reasons for. You will grow not in religion, but in a relationship with Jesus. I was asked this week, if Jesus were here on earth, where would you find Him? What would Jesus be busy doing? I believe that if Jesus were here today, you'd find Him in the halls of hospitals and nursing homes. You'd find Him in the prisons. You'd find Him in the homeless shelters. You'd find Him in empty subway terminals. Jesus would be where hurting people are. Would He be here? Would He find His way to Fisher and Dewey and the surrounding areas? Someone said, in order for someone or something to become clean, something else must become dirty. Someone else added to that, though, you can get everything dirty without getting anything clean, though. And as I close today, are you clean this morning? Are you hurting this morning? Do you want to release your pain, your struggles, your hurts, and your fears? Are you dealing with a load of care? Hey, guess what? Jesus loves you and wants to meet you right where you are. If you want to come this morning but believe you aren't good enough, that's okay. We're perfected by His grace, not because of our actions. Jesus isn't interested in our past sins. He's interested in a present, obedient, willing child. That's a hard thing for some of us to accept. I've done too much. I've gone too far. See, we're no longer defined by that old man when we are in Christ. We are a new creation, and we begin to walk a new way of life. Pastor Luke.